Hey everybody, happy Monday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Monday, January 17th, more than halfway through the first month of 2022. We've got a great lineup on today's show. We're going to get things kicked off with a conversation between Alan and Ashish Kuthiala, who is Traceable AI's Chief Marketing Officer. And this is a conversation that the two of them had at the KubeCon Cloud Native Con event happening last fall in Los Angeles. They discuss API security and vulnerabilities. It's a very, very relevant topic for many organizations that are diving deep into the API security, or the API landscape, I should say, and security is certainly a huge factor for organizations. So this is a very relevant conversation. After that, Alan speaks with Brendan O'Leary, certainly a friend to Techstrong TV. This is also another conversation that happened at KubeCon Cloud Native Con. Brendan O'Leary is with GitLab, and he's the senior DevOps evangelist there. And they discuss some tips for others to become a developer evangelist. And then they also talk about his role as part of the CNCF governing board. And they also talk about this new GitLab Kubernetes operator offering that GitLab has. So great conversation all the way around. After that, we have the Haunted Hacker podcast. This is part one of a two-part conversation that host Mike Jones has with Jane Franklin, who is owner and CEO of a company called New Start. She is certainly a role model for anybody in the cybersecurity industry. She is an award-winning tech entrepreneur. She's a best-selling author. She's a keynote speaker. She has been named as a top 20 global influencer in cybersecurity. She's been in the sector for more than 24 years, and she has built and sold her own hacking firm, and she's directed some of the world's most well-known cybersecurity consultancies. She is a powerhouse in the cybersecurity space. Mike had an awesome time talking to her. So many great topics that they covered during their discussion. So, as I said, this is part one of the two-part conversation, and totally worth checking out. After that, we have our Something Old segment. This features Andrew Wooten, who is the IT architect and solutions lead over at Interworks, and Rob Greggs, who is the senior systems engineer over at Arctic Wolf. This is from the recent InnoTech OKC, Oklahoma City conference that happened, I believe, at the beginning of December. This is a great presentation that the two of them collaborated on. It's called SIEM, SOAR, XDR, IDK, what's best for your organization. Cybersecurity landscape is a confusing one at best. So Andrew and Rob talk about what it means to implement efficient and effective SecOps, and organizations hopefully will have a little more clarity from the result of this conversation. So definitely want to check this one out if you have any questions about cybersecurity tools and practices. After that, I'm back with the news headlines, and then I have a great conversation with Giora Engel, who is the CEO and co-founder at Neosec, and Riza Shafli, who is the VP of products over at Kong. The two of them come on to talk about APIs, the API landscape, why API management and API security should go hand in hand, and what's at stake as APIs and API breaches become even more ubiquitous. Kong and Neosec actually formed a partnership in December of 2021, and so together they are very, very well versed on the topic and have a lot of information to impart. So definitely want to check this one out as well. After that, I have the webinar's preview for you, and then we round out today's episode with a View with Vizard conversation in which Mike Vizard speaks with Go2Cloud Careers CEO Michael Gibbs. They talk about the standardization, why standardizing on a single cloud for organizations can be very, very detrimental to their business. It's kind of an invitation to an outage. So it's a great conversation and definitely a lot of food for thought in that one. All right, that's the lineup. It's going to be a good one, folks, and we're going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, welcome back, everybody. First up, we've got a conversation between Alan and Ashish Kuthiala, who is the Traceable AI Chief Marketing Officer. This is from the recent KubeCon Cloud Native Con event in Los Angeles. They talk about API security and vulnerabilities and so much more. It's a great conversation. Let's get to it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
All right, we're back in LA live for KubeCon. Thanks for joining us. I'm really happy to be joined by a friend of mine, Ashish Kuthiala. Truth be told, I first met Ashish when he was at HP in their DevOps practice. Before that, Ashish was with Electric Cloud, which if you're a DevOps person, was one of the early players. Actually, Gene Kim's DevOps Enterprise Summit started out as the Electric Cloud User Conference. Exactly. Ashish went from HP, and from there he went to a little company called GitLab, which today IPO'd and I think closed, well, I don't want to embarrass Ashish, but I think it closed at 104 or something like that today. Right, yes. But Ashish left GitLab and has helped now found or lead the marketing efforts of Traceable AI, which if you're not familiar is another company that's started by Jyoti Bansal. Jyoti is, of course, the founder of AppDynamics and Harness, and now Traceable AI, his third company in here. So that's just a little pedigree and lineage, right? Ashish, welcome.
Thank you,
I feel like I'm describing a thoroughbred, right?
Thank you so much.
Welcome and thanks for being here. I wanted to talk a little bit about Traceable AI, though, Ashish. You know, for me, the big story at KubeCon this year is around observability.
Right.
But one of the kind of underlying stories I see with observability is the ability to do tracing and what a powerful tool it is. Traceable AI is a great example of this. While traceable is in the name, Traceable AI, it's really just the underlying technology that you guys have built or use to really do a great job as the world moves beyond WAFs. API security is where it's at today.
Absolutely.
Right? That's where the new attack surfaces is. People realizing we need to understand what our exposure here is.
Absolutely.
And it's something you guys are pioneering. Was it 2 or 3 months ago we did a live event?
About 3 months ago, yeah.
3 months ago you announced a free
version of one of our offerings.
Yep, and that was aimed, it's funny, it was, Traceable AI is a tool like many DevSecOps tools. It's for developers to help them do security. Of course, Traceable AI security, a lot of security folks have been jumping on it. But if you're a developer out here, right, why should the developers be using this?
Absolutely. So just to set a little bit of the bigger picture here, if you look at the way the app world is transforming and changing, we all know that more APIs are being adopted, whether you're developing APIs, you're using internal APIs, or even calling on external vendor APIs. It's the fast way to develop your application, leverage the best minds and software out there. And so what's happening is, it's very hard to secure your border anymore. It's not the castle and moat model.
No, that's gone.
And traffic is flowing through so many points. There's data on top of it. People create API specifications and they are violated all the time. Not always on purpose, but sometimes you just need to get something done and you write code, or you write an API and you don't document it. So as a result, there are so many shadow APIs, there's so many APIs that have been modified, third-party APIs that you just don't know anything about. So both from the development or engineering perspective and the security perspective, it's really important, first of all, to know what's my inventory of APIs? So often our customers, when they run our tool, discover APIs they had no clue that existed.
Right.
And then they find that, we also we inventory them, but we also then do some risk assessment and we score them. And then people will find that many APIs are out of spec or have some sort of security risk, whether it's the data or the way it's being used. So both on the development side, you want to know what APIs you're using. You want to know who's using them. Sometimes you want to charge back to some departments, if that's the need. You also want to know, what's in spec, out of spec, what you can use. But then ultimately security is everybody's responsibility, like we have been talking about.
Yep.
It's not just the security team who wants to know what's going on and where the danger is. Development wants to know it too. Are they going to use an API that's risky? Did they introduce something in the system that's risky? So it's a tool meant for the entire enterprise.
Agreed. To me, the problem, Ashish, boils down to who sets these APIs up?
Yeah.
It's not the security guy doesn't install or set up the API. Let's face it.
Right.
He's often or she often is the last person to know, right? Oh, there's
Absolutely.
an API there.
Yes.
The APIs get done either by the development or DevOps team, maybe by the application, SREs, stuff like that, but not the security folks.
But also externally. You may be leveraging one.
Or
It's
a
not
third
just
party,
internally, a third party
exactly.
one,
Right. So, again, and this is a common problem in security. Stuff rolls downhill,
Yes.
and it winds up in the security guy or the security gal's bucket of, hey, did you know about that API? Is it secured? I didn't even know it was there. It's a third-party thing.
Or even worse, you discover it after the fact when data has been breached,
when
an API's business logic has been abused.
Yep.
Right?
So I think part of the mission for traceable AI, and this is a hard one, is, security is everyone's responsibility. That's up here.
Yep.
But you need to get down here, which is, if you install an API or are you use an API, you own it. And if
Have
you
you
break
documented it?
you own it.
Exactly.
So if you have used an API, have you documented it?
Right.
Have you documented it? Have you run a scan to see if it's secure? Do the necessary parties who need to know about it know about it?
Absolutely. There's an additional element to that, right? So it's not just the APIs. The data that's being passed around it. Are you violating any PII rules?
Yeah.
Are you passing data that's being exposed?
Yep.
So it goes deeper than that. A data breach or interception of this.
Well, that's where the bite comes in, right?
Right.
You get a data breach with PII or HIPAA information, stuff like that, you're in trouble. So, again, I think we need a mindset shift of don't blame the security guy after the fact when your API goes south, right? If you're working in APIs, you got to be using something like traceable AI to understand what you got here.
So one is the fact to understand what exists, what risk it carries, who's interacting with whom. But there's a whole other aspect of this where everything can seem normal, everything is protected, but there can be external, let's call them hackers or people trying to break into the system who can actually abuse your business logic. So I'll give you a simple example. You might have a discount code on your website for 90% intended to be used one time for one item. But hackers can actually abuse this logic by repeatedly applying the same 90% discount and deleting your inventory at 10% the price that you intended to sell. And there's no security that's looking out for that. So you have to understand your business logic and understand when that's being violated.
Again,
so it
not the security person's
it's
job.
not something that security is looking for, right?
And this,
it's fraud.
Yeah. So this is a real, I think that's the challenge in traceable, as you probably know better than me. But that's the challenge you have in traceable AI is it's not just using your tool. Once they understand what the problem is, I think using your tool is a no-brainer, right? Or the service. Right? Yeah, it's understanding that problem that exists.
Exactly. You talked about WAFs, earlier in conversation. Now WAFs are, just like your antivirus tools used to be on your PCs, signature-based, looking for attacks in the past. They don't know what's coming next.
Look,
and so you need to understand that logic and be able to block it. You can't put a wall in front of anything anymore.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell you WAFs are obsolete, but if WAF is your defense with APIs involved, it's like the Maginot Line the French used in World War II.
Yes.
Didn't work so good.
They used to, but no more.
It worked good in World War I.
Exactly.
But you can't fight World War I in World War II.
No.
And you can't fight WAFs in a world of API transactions that are actually going kind of outside that WAF and everything, right?
No, look, the pace of change is really rapid right now. It's very hard to manually keep up. So you need something that automatically understands any changes that happen, but also adapt to any business logic that you're changing and protect you. You can no longer just place defenses, and hope that they will work. You just need to be integrated into your application logic almost, to understand what's going wrong when it does.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen a few companies here I've spoken to over the last 2 days that are dealing with APIs. Not necessarily API security per se, let's call it more API management.
Right. API observability, risk management,
number one is similar to what you talk about, which is, hey, at first we need to know what APIs do we have.
Absolutely.
But then beyond that, for instance, duplicate APIs that do the same exact thing.
Yes.
You installed one API, you left the company.
Right.
6 months later, I didn't realize you got that API.
Back again.
I installed another one. Maybe it's a different API, does the same thing. So now we got two APIs doing the same exact thing.
Right.
One gets older.
Or it morphs because you added some logic to it.
Right, something I added.
Right.
And there is no, it's the Wild West out there with this.
Right now it is, because people are still learning. Right?
So what do we got to do?
I think we need to educate the market that this is a real problem. Often, we're finding out, because, we just launched last year. We just launched our free product. And as we are interacting with more prospects and customers, we're realizing that everybody understands the wording API and API management and security, but they don't place it on their topmost priority. It's almost like, I understand it's important, but I'm not sure if I need to do something about it right now.
Right.
And that risk is getting exponentially greater every day, every minute. So all of us, right, not just Traceable, but every other vendor who's working in this space needs to start to educate the market. And you see Gartner now shifting and talking about why APIs are important, why managing them and managing their security around that is important. So I'm starting to see this shift in educating the market.
You know what? So unfortunately, and I'm not banging anyone, but if it's gotten to the point where Gartner's seeing it, it's almost already too late. That means it's a real problem.
Already. It's a real problem.
Because they're kind of a lagging indicator, not a leading indicator. I don't, and it's good that they are. I'm happy they are, but I almost feel like, and I don't know if it's a CNCF thing, because we really see this with service meshes, for instance, right? They're big API abusers as well as users.
Abusers, yes.
Yeah. Or do we need some other sort of API security consortium to help, take a single vendor out of it and educate the market about it?
I think we need to join hands. It's a huge problem, and people are starting to speak about it and educate it. Coming together to educate everybody serves in everybody's best interests. Absolutely does.
I got some ideas. We'll talk offline. but I want to call my friends at RSA conference in February and see.
That'd be awesome.
I'll talk to you about it offline. I got an idea. But it's a problem. But nevertheless, you want to get out ahead of this problem. You want to, jump on it. Ashish, where can they go get your free trial?
I think it's really easy. You go to traceable.ai/free, or just go to traceable.ai and you will see, what it is. Pretty easy to sign up, and we made it a self-service product. In security, that's pretty rare. So you can sign up, you can kind of like deploy your own, instance, and you can start to see all your APIs, and you can start to see like the risk associated with risk scores, etc. When underneath of this, there's a very complex machine learning language, a platform that's observing what's going on in your traffic and learning your normal baseline behavior versus what's abnormal.
All right.
So this is all something you can try, and you don't have to pay for it. You can
And
just
it's free.
sign up.
Go check it out. That's traceable.ai/free. Ashish, thanks for coming on and talking with us,
My
man.
pleasure,
it's a pleasure
Alan.
to see you.
Nice to see you again.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll be right back here. We're live in LA. We'll be back in a moment. Thanks.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, next up, we've got another conversation that Alan had from KubeCon Cloud Native Con. This one is with Brendan O'Leary, who is the Senior DevOps Evangelist over at GitLab. He's also a member of the CNCF Governing Board, and so they talk about some tips on how people can become developer advocates or developer evangelists, and what Brendan is doing as part of the CNCF Governing Board. I also talk about GitLab's new Kubernetes operator technology. So good stuff all the way around. Let's get to it.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, we're back live at Kubernetes, KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. We're in Los Angeles. We're not in our studios. This is not some green screen hallucination. We're really happy to be back live and seeing people walk around. I see my friend Bill Mon from Styra just passed by. But I'm here with another friend of mine who we have been doing our virtual thing, I guess since COVID started, right, Brendan?
I think that's basically when we started, yeah.
Yeah, and he's the star of The Lab, which is hopefully monthly, sometimes a little longer interval show from our friends at GitLab, and they tell us about what's new in every month's release of GitLab, because every month there is a new release.
Yeah.
Is it the 22nd?
On the 22nd of every month.
On the
clockwork.
22nd.
Set your calendar to it.
Yeah, and Brendan, tells us about it. This is Brendan O'Leary. Brendan, well, you are a developer evangelist.
Correct,
with
yep.
GitLab. He's also you're on working group at CNCF.
I'm on the governing board, yeah.
Governing board
for
of CNCF.
Correct.
He's just an all-around nice guy to have on here. And it's a pleasure to have you here, Brendan.
Yeah, thanks
in
for having
person,
me.
man.
It's great to see you in person.
I mean, you ain't kidding.
When they told me you were coming, I was like, well, we've got to make this happen.
Absolutely. I'm thinking, I think when we first started doing the COVID interviews, you were in your basement.
I was.
And then it was very virtualized. You had a virtual background on your GitLab thing, and then they moved you upstairs.
I kicked my youngest daughter out of the nursery, and I moved into the nursery.
Poor girl, we moved her crib into the basement. But
well, no.
Look, she'll never know.
She's
I'm
young.
only kidding, she's young.
Yeah.
Shit, it won't affect her. But anyway, we've all been through this evolution. But now we're here. Real excited to be here. I want to talk about your experience on the board. But before we do that, let's jump into some GitLab news. Let's talk a little bit about Kubernetes Operator.
Yeah, we're really excited. We'd released the Kubernetes operator in like an alpha form, I think in 13.3 or 13.4, so a few months ago. But we're announcing that it's generally available today.
Oh, that's great.
So we're really excited about that. It means that folks can, the beauty of an operator in the Kubernetes world is, the idea is you can leverage what folks know about running the system at scale to then run it yourself at scale. As you know, a lot of our customers are self-managed. They want to run their own GitLab server. And so this allows us to take some of the best practices that our SREs know from running GitLab.com and kind of codify those in an operator and make it really easy for people to deploy GitLab into any Kubernetes platform and into OpenShift. So we're really excited to be working with Red Hat on getting it into OpenShift.
Absolutely. For those in our audience who maybe have heard the term operator, but they're not 100% sure what it means, Brendan, why don't we kind of classify?
Sure.
Because operator, it's such an important role and term within this Kubernetes, whether you're talking about Helm or so many of the open cloud native.
Sure, yeah, so Kubernetes is this great set of APIs and tools for running software, but it's very intentionally just that. It's not, it's not very, it doesn't really force you down one path or another. So when you go to deploy your software to Kubernetes, your world's your oyster, which is good, but then also you want to have a path that's a known path, right? And so that's where things like Helm, right? So we've had a Helm chart for some time. Helm's one way of deploying applications and saying, okay, what does the structure of this application look like when it lives in Kubernetes? And Operator is really like our next evolution of that, to allow people to really simply deploy GitLab, but also do it in a way that's super scalable. So that's a hard balance to strike, right? Like, oh, it's simple to deploy because I can install it on my laptop, but oh wait, now I've got 1,000 people using it. How do I scale it?
Yeah.
So the Operator hopefully is going to allow people to kind of balance those two things together.
I love it. And it's generally available as of today. So if you're watching this right now, you could go do it.
Exactly, yep.
Go get it.
Take a look.
Very cool. Let's talk a little bit, and again, don't say anything that's going to get you in trouble, but talk about your role.
Sure. So my role as a developer evangelist for GitLab?
Well, no, I was talking about with CNCF.
Okay, yeah, sure, yeah. So, I'd love to talk about that. So the governing board of the CNCF is kind of responsible for the operations and marketing, advising the staff of the CNCF on what they can do, or how we can strategize to help grow the community, right? We heard Priyanka this morning talk a lot about, realizing resiliency, right? That's the theme of the conference.
Yep.
And she talked a lot about also this, very inclusive community. And I think I'm very proud to be part of the cloud native community. I think it's one of the most inclusive communities I've ever seen and know of in my, I don't want to say in history, but I can't think of a more inclusive and more friendly place. And so that's what we're focused on. And we get together. This will actually be my first time meeting the board in person, which is nice because I've been on the board basically since COVID. And I've been on Zoom
I mean, I love the thing realizing resiliency, because though I think there's obvious application to the software we're running and the systems we're running, but to me there's a human element to realizing resiliency, right? Humans are resilient. Everything we've been through, we figured out a way to get here.
Yeah, well, we've seen this huge, of course, in the past 2 years, this face of resiliency. The human resiliency story I tell you, if I can take a little, is my kids. When it was everyone's locking down, we had the kids, and in the neighborhood, we didn't want them necessarily to, don't go, rolling around in the mud with other kids, and they ended up playing bicycle shadow tag. So they'd all be on their bikes, and they could stay 6 feet apart, but if I ran over the shadow of your bike, then you're it.
Wow.
And I was just like, the resiliency of the human spirit,
kids
right?
Will find a way to play.
Yeah, and so, and that's what we want to, bring that kind of spirit, right? You see all these great folks in this community that bring that spirit, and if I could say kid-like spirit, well, look, we're all,
you know what they say, inside of every older person is a young guy saying, how the hell did I get here?
I'm familiar with that.
Yes, so I hear you.
My younger person has hair, though.
Okay, you're going to go there with me.
Well, you got more than I do, though.
Only because you cut yours. You know what? Let go easy, Brendan. Go easy. And we can play shadow hair tag or something.
Exactly.
All right, let's change the subject here.
Sure.
Let's talk GitLab a little bit. So exciting things going on. We're not going to get into everything. I think you're not allowed to talk about. But you are a developer advocate, an evangelist.
Yep.
People out there, how the hell do I get that job?
That's a great question. I had a long road to it. I've spent time as I call myself an amateur engineer, right? I wasn't classically trained. I used to, play around with code and learn as much as I can. And the beauty of open source, right? GitLab is based on this open source project. And so we've had the pleasure of being able to have collaborators from all over the world, right? Over 2,000 at this point. Folks have contributed code directly into GitLab. And so that's more people than work for GitLab. And so it's really cool to be able to do that. And a lot of people, it's little things and it's big things, right? There's someone that years ago added the GitLab runner, which is a huge part of GitLab now. But there's also little things about, what doesn't make sense about it? What are the things that it should do better, right? And that's the beauty of it is, we able to build this platform together. And we just recently celebrated our 10-year anniversary. So,
GitLab did?
10 years since our first commit to the open source project. So the first commit was on October 8th, 2011.
Wow,
so
I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah,
7.
yeah, and it was cool because we said, oh hey, let's celebrate. What was your first commit to GitLab? And there were 2 or 3 people that made their first commit that day, just now.
Really?
Right? Yeah.
Very
so
cool.
It's really cool. There's always an open opportunity.
What I love about the role, Brandon, is it's not a one-way role. So it's not you on behalf of GitLab out to the community. You also serve as that conduit from the community back into GitLab for those kinds of things. You're the second evangelist I've interviewed this morning.
Okay.
I had my friend Chris O'Reilly from Splunk on earlier. Chris and I know each other probably close to 10 years now. And, he was saying, man, I feel like I've been trapped in my house for almost 2 years as an evangelist, as an advocate.
Yeah.
It's so great to just be out here.
It is.
Again.
It's nice to be out, right? It's funny. I used to work in our product group, right? And so I spent some time as a product manager, and I transfer. I'd been talked to. Actually, Priyanka Sharma talked me into it to becoming an evangelist, and that was in January of 2020. So.
Really?
I had a very interesting timing.
You had about a month or 2,
right.
and then back to the
a
bunker.
Month of travel, and then I was in my house for 20 minutes. So
well, it's going to be a world open to you now, my friend.
So yeah, very excited to be out and about and get to see people, and really proud of the event that we were able to put on here.
Oh, it's great. You guys are doing. Look, I feel safe here.
Yeah, I feel safe here. Exactly.
It's a really spread out, well done event. Of course, the next KubeCon is in, I think, Valencia.
Valencia, Spain, yes.
Yeah, and we are looking forward to that. I'd love to go to Valencia. And I think that's it, Brendan, man. When we get in the next lab from you, actually, we have one, I think, in the can.
Right before I came. So
it'll be out next week on Techstrong TV. Check it out. Keep it up, man. People like the lab. We get feedback on that.
Awesome. Yeah.
Keep
I'm
it up.
excited to do it.
All right. Brendan
Thank you,
O'Leary.
Great to see you.
Just an all-around nice guy when it comes to cloud native and everything else. Here with us, we're live in LA at KubeCon. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we've got the Haunted Hacker podcast. This is part one of a two-part conversation that host Mike Jones has with Jane Franklin, who is the owner and CTO of a company called New Start. She's a cybersecurity rock star. She has been in the business for about 24 years or so. She's bought and sold hacker firms, consultancies, you name it, but she's award-winning tech entrepreneur. She's also a best-selling author and a keynote speaker. And she and Mike have just a fascinating conversation about so many different things. It's totally a conversation worth checking out. So let's get to it.
Welcome, everybody, to the Haunted Hacker podcast, number 222, given to me by Jane Franklin. A little bit of news before we get started. I will be speaking at FinCon DX, a financial conference, keynoting that tomorrow for Techstrong. And I'll be speaking with ICE in January and a couple other talks to be solidified in December. I've locked away the mascot tonight. The Loki, the Maine Coon kitten, decides that he likes to terrorize the podcast and interrupt. So he's busy right now. Other than that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm sitting here drinking PG Tips that I had imported and thinking about my time in London. And tonight we have a great British guest. I look up to her, and she has an amazing career path and story. So Jane, why don't you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your background and journey?
Cheers to that, Mike. It's so good to be here. So I've been in information security or cybersecurity for over 24 years. I've built my own. So first of all, I'm an entrepreneur. So that's what I do. I'm also a speaker and a best-selling author. And sometimes I say I'm a women's activist, or certainly I say I'm a change agent. And I've been in cybersecurity or information security for over 24 years. I built my own global penetration testing company, and I owned that for 16 years. And during the course of my career, I've contributed to major industry standards and accreditations, schemes and forums like CREST and OWASP and Cyber Essentials. I work as an awards judge still, so I do lots of judging. It's not just in cyber, it might be in technology, and it also is in literature as well. And that's across all the kind of age groups as well. So some of the things that I do are for teens, which is really exciting and just inspiring. It's incredible. And I'm featured in the media quite a lot. So that could be in all of the main British broadsheets like the Times, the Financial Times, the BBC, Forbes, which obviously isn't British, but many of those along with industry press. And I do a lot of research, and I have my insecurity scholarships, which are for women mostly, and I offer those out. I provided something like 335 scholarships over the course of 3 years, and that's a sum of about, or a value of about $500,000 US. I kind of counted it up the other day. I'm like so excited about that.
Wow.
So yeah. So now really what I'm doing is I'm still working on my main mission, which is to really get more women into cybersecurity and remaining in it. That's the focus of my work. And I work with women and I work with businesses who value women. And the work that I do really is around my trainings, my keynotes, and a brand new women's platform that I've just built, which is called The Source. And that is pulling a lot of the great work that other women's groups and some training groups that are doing that are furthering the mission into one place. So The Source. So it will become the main place that any woman in cyber or someone who's looking to get into it wants to go and get information really, really fast and be supported.
That's fantastic. You know, I'm a big advocate for diversity. And I think what you and others do in the industry as far as promoting women in tech and you know, diverse groups into tech, and not just, you know, race or you know, ethnicity or sex, but complete diversity. I think is really awesome. There's so many groups popping up, around autism and neurodiversity and stuff like that. I think it's beneficial. We all think differently, and it takes a variety of people to make a holistic solution, I think. So I really respect that. You mentioned teens. Some of the work that I've done with the teens in London specifically, I think that's some of the most rewarding work that I've done. I mean, to see them excited about something and to see them excited about tech or industry I think it's a hope for the future.
I have to agree with you. I've got this big focus on women, but really, aside from that, or it's certainly in parallel, is the work that I do with young people. And I absolutely love that. Working with Maggie Philbin in the UK on Tech Teens, the awards there is just incredible. These kids are absolutely amazing. What they come up with, the inventions, the innovations is absolutely amazing. And particularly during lockdown as well. So I love that work that I do. And certainly in terms of my business, I've just brought on some trainees. So I've got 2 17-year-old boys, 1 18-year-old boy. So three young men. One is neurodiverse. And it's just, they excite me so much, all of this work. And I'm a huge advocate for getting more young people in and really supporting them in. And I'm a mom of 3 kids. So my eldest one has done his degree. The other 2 are going through it, but it's really kind of valuing them. So investing in the future as opposed to abusing them and taking them for granted, and so on, which is, as a mother, I've seen that, and also I've witnessed that in the industry. And it's important that we don't do that, and we really help them on their way, and particularly kids from disadvantaged backgrounds. So the group of young men that I've got in have come from disadvantaged backgrounds, and it is so rewarding to help them on their way.
Absolutely. Miss Philbin, she was a broadcaster at one point, wasn't she? TV broadcaster. So I met her in Scotland at Scott Secure, one of my very first talks up there. She's a fantastic speaker as well. So that's really interesting. So tell me what got you interested in cyber? Let's back up all the way and what made Jane make the decision to go that route?
Well, I kind of came into cyber in a very unconventional way, which is very typical of me. I do things in a topsy-turvy way, not intentionally. It just kind of works out that way. So my background is in art and design. So I trained as a designer, and I still identify very much as a designer. I love design. Good design is about form and function. And so I met someone, I fell in love with that person, and we built a business. And I was always interested in tech, even though I trained as a designer and kind of worked as a designer and then branched out into another career. I was steered into technology largely through the person that I met. So he was into tech, and he invited me. He said, "Look, come along. Do you think we can do this?" I was in my 20s. Naively, I said, "Yeah, absolutely," because he was very much, you know what you're getting yourself into. And it was just like, yeah, of course I do. And it's just like, I didn't have a clue. But because I really didn't know anything about technology, the thing that interested me the most was security. And it was really new. In 1997, that was pretty new, but it was feasible. I really enjoyed artificial intelligence, but that was just too new at the time, whereas security, it was feasible to build a business. And so that's how I got into it. I built my own tech company, led with security, and built a fantastic company. I'm really proud of that company that I built and owned for 16 years.
Yeah, it seems like everything you touch turns to gold. I was looking through your career and your resume, and it's just I didn't even know where to start. Like, there were so many things and so many diverse things on your resume. It was insane. I have to say, probably one of the most accomplished people that I've had the pleasure of speaking to. And it's funny you say design. So I went to art school. out of high school. And I think a lot of us in security, especially, have a creative streak or creative mind. I think it's necessary for what we do.
Yeah, what I see is I still say that I see patterns. So it's like I've gone from this whole design and textile design of creating patterns and things like that. But I see patterns. You know, I kind of, it's a skill that I have. I'm looking for connections and patterns and trends and things like that. But what I see in our industry, I see a huge connection with music. So it's pretty much that is really, really strong. Either we have musicians that are just creating music in the background, or otherwise they are really, really into it. You know, some yes, maybe art, but music is the common, particularly so in pen testing. It's just like profile-wise, it's just like really keen musicians, and it's not like any other industry. It's particularly high in our industry. That's what I see.
Yeah, exactly. I just had Kevin Thomas on a couple weeks ago, and he's huge into music. And I also do like electronic music. I DJ and mix music, and I played guitar when I was younger. So I totally see that in pen testing. That's actually one of my questions when I interview people for a job is, what instrument do you play? And what I found is most people are musicians that are in pen testing.
There you go. There you go. It's not like any other industry. We just have an abundance of musicians in our industry. There's some kind of link there, probably with how the mind and brain works. Yeah. So and I do agree, and that's why I always am an advocate for diversity. So obviously I'm out there kind of leading with gender, but it's just like diversity in terms of experience. And it's funny, the other day I was with some people, and we were talking about the industry, and one of those people kind of specified that she was technical and almost like alienated the other two who weren't technical. And for me, I don't, unless it's absolutely necessary to kind of differentiate, I just say that we're all in security. We're in cybersecurity or information security or security, because I find that really unifying. And we need that diversity in order to become better problem solvers, in order to see things, patterns or solutions that we might miss. The more diverse we can be, the better we are going to be at our jobs, at building things, at taking things apart, breaking things, and all of these things we need to do.
100%. When I started pen testing, one of the things that I used to do is actually visualize the network, like as if I was in the network, physically in it. And I think a lot of people that I've worked with do the same thing, visualize attacks and visualize what's going on instead of just reading it on paper. And I think that also takes a creative mind. Another thing too is the industry itself. You know, you talk about unification and diversity, and we have such a great industry, but we also have our downfalls as well. While we're unified as an industry, I have never seen an industry so cliquish, where you have groups that are always butting heads against each other. And, you know, that I don't understand it. Maybe that has to do with my diversity, my neurodiversity, but what's your take on that?
Yeah, we have really interesting industry. We have both a defense and an attack side. So, and often there are these two camps. So the defending and the protecting. And sometimes I see a toxicity. If I'm being completely frank, there's a toxicity there. And sometimes the culture can be really hard and toxic. So sometimes you find yourself in amongst people who are always attacking. They're on the attack the whole time. I'm going to bring you down. And sometimes they don't realize that they're doing it. You know, a few years ago, I was trolled online, and it all kind of worked out really well in the end. And I wrote about it and learned lessons from it. And I remember one of the guys coming and attacking me, and someone coming to my defense, and this person became on my side, and he said, "I'm so sorry, I just have a natural default to attack." So sometimes you can see that with the culture, and it's really important that we don't not allow this, but we kind of call it out or put a stop as much to it as possible, because it is to the detriment of our industry. It really is holding us back. And there are some really there is some people that really need a lot of help and healing, so that they are not behaving in that manner. And it upsets me, particularly when I see young people doing this. It shows huge insecurity, and it's not good for our, in terms of like publicity. It's just like, come into our industry. It's like right now we almost have we're well known actually for behaving in this way, and obviously not all of us behave in this way. It's probably something like 20% of the industry behave in that way, but to all and sundry, it just appears like that. It's harsh. And I also know some great people in the industry who are really sick and tired of it, and they will hold their hands up and say, do you know what, I don't want to be on Twitter anymore, or I don't want to be in this industry anymore. So it's really important that we call out this toxic, unhealthy behavior, and we're not contributing to it, and we're not turning a blind eye. And that is some of the work that I do, whether it's through the women's work or just in general, calling this bad behavior, or sometimes poor leadership, where people turn the other way and they just ignore it. And it's just like, it's okay so long as business is good, so long as the money keeps rolling in, I can turn a blind eye to it. I don't like that at all.
No, absolutely not. And I've been the target of some of that stuff too. And it's, you never know what's going on in a person's life. And especially in our industry where mental health and I've lost several friends to suicide in the industry. You never know what that person's going through. And when someone attacks them like that, you don't know the damage you could potentially cause. I tried to take the stance of not responding to it, but it is so difficult. It is so poisonous and so difficult.
It is. Sometimes you do need to ignore it. I mean, it's just like the higher your profile goes, the more you're going to be attacked. And I think it's Brené Brown who said, are you ready to fight in the arena? It's worse to that effect. Every single day you enter the arena. Are you prepared for that? Are you ready to enter the arena as a gladiator, as a fighter, but not necessarily going out to cause a fight or or to pick a fight? So there are times when you can ignore it. And there are times when I've ignored it and just kind of gone, do you know what? I'm not answering you. You're just out to do that. And I'm not going to participate. And silence can be quite powerful. And then there are other times where you have onlookers and you need to call it out, and you do need to defend yourself. For me, what I always try and do is I always try and understand someone who's interacting with me, and try and understand it from their perspective. And I will give them the benefit of the doubt. But if it continues, then I've usually got something that I will, just a one-liner. It's just like, and what I say is your behavior or your words are, what is it that I say? Something like, illustrative, or it's not illustrative. It's something like that. It's just like your words say a lot about you. It's because they do. I'll have to find this phrase that I usually use. I haven't used it in a long time because it's been good. I've been okay out there. If ever I make a mistake, I stick my hands up and say, I've made a mistake. I'm sorry. Your words are very revealing. That's what I say. Your words are very revealing. And then that's it. So that's because it is. A lot of what people say reveals more about them than it does about the person that they are bitching or moaning or attacking. Right. So that's my one-liner. Your words are really revealing. And then I leave it like that and move on.
I think I may steal that, as a matter of fact. But yeah, and the words that we're talking about last forever. When they put that stuff on the internet or on social platforms, guess what? It's always there. And
words, sticks and stones can break my bones, and words will never harm me. And many of us have been brought up with that saying. But unfortunately, words are very powerful. Words are energy, and they can be hugely destructive, if not life-threatening. So yeah, those words are, you can take action and you can inform if it's done on social media, the channels. But yeah, you need support around you. You really do. That's
I think that's really important. And we talk about, people around you and things going on like that on the internet. Sadly enough, some of the social media platforms do the same thing, pick on people and, Twitter and I guess it's called Meta now. Meta tended to do that. And in the US, we don't have quite the leadership to look up to when it comes to that behavior. Our former president was infamous for flaming people on Twitter all the time. So, and I think kids, they see this as well. It's not just constrained to our industry. I think kids go through it quite a bit. And it's sad. It really is. The internet is supposed to be somewhere where you can go learn, somewhere where you can communicate with people that you would probably never get a chance to communicate with. It's a huge opportunity tool. And I hate to see it used that way. But it's been that way since 95, 96, I think. I started out about the same time you did. And I worked at a software support company. And back then, if you wanted to learn something, you couldn't just go into a BBS or IRC channel and ask a question, because that was not allowed. Like if you asked a question, you would get RTM, you read the manual, you would get, flamed pretty hard. So you had to learn pretty much everything on your own. Kids these days have it completely easy. There's the whole internet.
But this is it. They do. I mean, it's all there for them. But you think, I mean, this is the thing. For us coming into the industry, we had to learn on the job. Like now it's like closed down. You have to be qualified and certified with this, that, and the other. Particularly in pen testing, it was just like, you were self-taught and you found your way and tinkered and things like that. But yeah, the barriers are down. They just need to be lifted a bit with a bit more consideration as to who is available. And we wonder why we've got a shortage of talent or not enough people applying. It's just like, well, you've closed the doors, you've restricted, it wasn't like that in our day, and we've all done okay in this industry and found our way. So, and it's not that things have got more complicated, because actually a lot of the time, we're still dealing with the same issues that we were 10, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, literally, I'm about to put a blog out and I looked at it and it's just like, that's 10 years on and over 10 years on, 12 years maybe, we're still dealing with the same issues. We haven't moved on in a decade.
Right, exactly. And when you look at some of the defense products, I talk about this quite a bit. Some of the defense products that we have are not more advanced. They still have the same foundation of what we had back in the late 90s. And it's kind of shocking, but it's also telling in a way. As an industry, we have moved quite far, but we haven't moved that far from where we started, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I really agree. Yeah, there are some fun things out there, and artificial intelligence has moved on, machine learning has moved on, and some novel ways of crowdsourcing intelligence and making a business out of that, but actually doing good from it. So the more we are a collective, the more unified, the more we're sharing and collaborating, the better we can do. So it's really good to see some of those ways coming about, but equally it's disappointing that we're still having the same discussions that we were 10, 15, 20 years ago, and that hasn't moved on. It's just like, and sometimes that can be quite boring. I mean, during stages, throughout my 24 years, sometimes because I like new and I like challenges and things like that, sometimes it's been like, it's the same old stuff, so it's almost like having from it and then having an injection of innovation is good. It's like exciting. Oh, this has come along. This is new. That's great. But yeah, so I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I was expecting to get all this new experience and excitement when I started taking on incident response this past year, and I can tell you that it's just as frustrating as when people would say, "What can I do to secure my network?" Patch, right? So with incident response, it's the same incident every time I respond, and the same reasons. And as an industry, I think we're failing at moving that bar of security up.
Yeah, or you look at secure life cycle. It's just like the way that things are being built. Why have we not got more influence? We need more power. We need more influence so that technology can be built, from the ground up with security actually in mind from that initial design phase, as opposed to bolted on at the end or not even considered or built. Just the way that technology is ridiculous, that we are using it, not just in terms of security community, but in terms of consumers, whether they're small businesses or large businesses. And it's just like, why is the security not a higher priority? And then by security, I also mean privacy as well. So say, for example, often when we're coming to pen test a product that we might have bought, there aren't any or there are very few, not certificates or badges, but it's just like you're having to pen test it after buying it and implementing it. And then you're discovering vulnerabilities, or then you're discovering considerations that the vendor won't do anything about. So it's just like, well, we're just going to ignore that because our other users aren't voting it as a higher enough priority, or whatever it is. That is not good enough. Not in the age that we're living in, not in this digital age. It's not good enough.
No, I totally agree. And when you look at why companies do that, so I have my own theory. I have a theory that, let's take Microsoft, let's take Amazon, some of those other companies, and look at the way they produce technology. They always want to be the first to the market with the most features. That's their whole objective. And so they sacrifice putting that stuff back into production to iron out the kinks, and they just throw it out there to make that dollar quick. And then we're left with vulnerable products 10 years later. For the next 10 years, we're struggling.
All right, we are back. Next up, we've got our Something Old segment. This is from the recent InnoTech Oklahoma City conference that happened at the beginning of December. This one features Andrew Wooten, who is the IT architecture and solutions lead over at Interworks, and Rob Greggs, who's the senior systems engineer at Arctic Wolf. And they have a joint presentation titled SIEM, SOAR, XDR, IDK, What's Best for Your Organizations? Attempts to kind of make the cybersecurity landscape a little less complex for organizations as they strive to implement efficient and effective SecOps. It's a great presentation. Let's roll it now.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming. My name is Andrew Wooten. I'm a IT solutions and architecture lead at Interworks. We are I'm going to progress your slide here. So we're a local IT and data services and solutions company. We're headquartered in Stillwater. We've got an office just a couple blocks away here in Bricktown. We're in Tulsa as well. We provide full IT services to our clients across primarily this region, but also across the U.S. in some cases, working with clients in everything from fully outsourced IT services to single project implementation, solution scoping, and providing things like that. So today we're talking about security, and we've got our partners, Arctic Wolf here, and I'll let Rob kind of give an intro for them in a moment. But the security landscape is constantly changing. It's something that as a services and solutions provider, we've got to stay in front of. And our clients expect that we are constantly understanding the market and what's out there, and helping guide our clients to the solutions they need to keep their organizations and their data secure. That landscape has changed a lot. And I've got Daniel Holm, our Director of Enterprise Solutions, here as well. And Daniel, if you want to talk, just kind of, I guess you can join me for the broadcast. Talk a little bit about just kind of the shift that we've seen in the last few years, really, even, and kind of what led us to our partnership with Arctic Wolf.
Yeah, certainly. And I've been with Interworks for 18 years now, so I've seen quite a few shifts in security and things. And at one point, we just kind of trusted that antivirus was good enough. I talked a few years ago here at EdTech about security being more a kind of cat and mouse game, a bit of a whack-a-mole thing. You're always fixing one thing and something else pops up. But attacks are definitely getting more serious, targeted, more costly to organizations. And what we've seen is a lot more cyber insurance needs, because people are really getting held hostage and ransomed and things like that. So, I mean, it's not, if it happens, it's more or less like when it's going to happen. Everybody's a target, everybody's a risk at this point. And with insurance needs and customer and industry regulations, people are seeing a lot more demand for 24/7 security monitoring. So if you need to design that and build that in-house, I mean, 24/7, 365 really means hiring probably 5 people. 2 of those will be extremely expensive to actually hire and maintain and be able to trust. And it's really hard just to keep the, industry or the infrastructure secure. So I've known Derek here for over 10 years, so long track record. And I've been talking with Arctic Wolf for over 5 years here. So we do want to just let them introduce themselves, and they can talk a little more about their security solution in the marketplace here. So.
Woo! Best class of the day, right? Derek Williams, I'm the Enterprise Account Executive for Arctic Wolf here in Oklahoma, based here in Oklahoma. Excited to talk cybersecurity with you guys today. There's a lot of buzzwords out there, right? Right? XDR, SIEM, EDR, what's going on from that perspective? I live, eat, and breathe it daily. It's hard for me to keep up. So hopefully today we're going to give you a nice little education on what all this is, and talk about, just what we're seeing. So I'll give you a brief overview of Arctic Wolf, just like 30 seconds. Arctic Wolf, we are a cybersecurity company. We have over 3,000 customers across the world. We are, if you look at Gartner, we're at the top of the list from a 24/7 SOC operational perspective. We've been in business since 2012. Cybersecurity is what we do, right? We are one of the leaders, if not the leader, in IT cybersecurity for North America. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Rob Greggs. I'll let Rob introduce himself, but he comes from your side of the fence, right? Rob was, prior to coming over here with me on the dark side of sales, he was the CIO of OCCC. So he's dealt with it in large organizations and kind of understands what's going on from that perspective. So we'll let Rob take you through the next 25 minutes.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you today. I appreciate everybody being here. So my role at Arctic Wolf is systems engineer, systems architect, security architect. And my background is one of 21 years doing IT operations. So I was a CIO. I was the guy who deployed voice, network, firewalls. I went from, if you're in security, you probably were familiar with some of the OG firewalls, PICs. I went to ASA. I went to ASA with the daughter card. I went to Tipping Point IDS IPS. I deployed Palo firewalls. I deployed platforms, Cortex, Wildfire, all of the services and the way we've seen security iterate over time. Now, it seems like we have this acronym soup going on without a whole lot of definition of what the value is to my business and how it's going to move the needle or produce outcomes that are actionable or meaningful to protecting the business. I don't know. Did you look at your the options for sessions? Clearly you did, because you came to the best one. But you looked at your options for. Did you notice a theme? Anybody notice a theme? Security is a theme. Everybody's talking about it, but how do we actually make sense of it? So that's kind of where we want to go today. I'll talk about what Arctic Wolf does at the end and give you a little bit of understanding about what our platform is and where we fit. But really, I want to take a step back, and rather than just pitch, to be real salesy, I'm the engineer. I can't really do that like Derek can. I want to talk about really what is the industry talking about? What is the alphabet soup of the things, and where do we actually see those implement in our businesses? So let's jump right in. SIM, SOAR, XDR, oh my, I feel like I'm listening to the Wizard of Oz. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my, right? What are these things? There's some sort of threat. There's some sort of value. There's some sort of something I'm going to get out of these, or I'm supposed to understand what all of these are and what they do for my business. And SIM, SOAR, XDR, those are just like the very beginning. They're the tip of the iceberg. MDR, EPP, EDR, IDR, XDR. Then there's the greatest, my favorite thing that you can tag to anything, next gen, right? Everything next gen. That's the best, right? The next gen thing is where you want to go. It's what you want to do. And I'll talk about these. You need some of these things, these acronyms. I'll define some of these. You need these things in your environment. Here's the challenge. As security has changed over time, and we have to address, as IT professionals, security professionals, new facets of attack surface in our organization as a result of the way we iterate our operational approach, our cloud approach, or we fold together different integrated, whether it be API or some semi-automated integrated approach to business processes. We implement these things. And our vendors, golly, I am one now, right? Our vendors end up coming to us and pushing MDR, EPP, ETH, EDR, all of these things. Yet there's this thing screaming, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, because the reality is we're shown this amazing thing. It's incredible. It's bigger than it does everything that we could possibly want. But nobody wants to actually pull the curtain back to see who's going to operate this. What value is this actually going to deliver? How can I operationalize this security platform or technology in a way that delivers value to my business? So I think all too often we end up not really looking deep enough into our organizations and how we implement and operationalize the things that we purchase. And you begin to look at what you've implemented, and you can see it gets a little bit crazy. So I call it acronym soup: Security Incident Event Management, a SIEM, or people pronounce it different ways. SOAR, Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response. We'll talk a little bit about what that is, what it does. Network Traffic Analysis, NTA, whether you're using NetFlow, JFlow, SFlow technology, you're capturing some sort of flow data off of your network infrastructure, your core route switch device or firewall device. IDS, you can marry that with IPS. Detection is one thing, prevention is another. Can my device also perform blocking of the bad thing based on signature, algorithmic identification of some traffic, right? EPP, Endpoint Protection Platform, not to be confused with EDR, Endpoint Detection and Response. Golly, it kind of gets a little crazy here. MTH, Managed Threat Hunting. What about all the data that's coming off of the EDR and the EPP? Who's going to MTH that, right? It gets nuts. MDR, Managed Detection Response, and XDR, which I think is one of the most interesting things in here. XDR, Extended Detection Response, cross-disciplinary detection and response, as CompTIA defines it as cross detect. It can be defined a lot of different ways, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. So let's take a step back. Really, at its most basic level, back in it had to have been around '99. I was a Cisco Mars customer. Anybody remember Mars? It's this like black box. You point all your logs to it and it aggregates and correlates. It was like one of the OG SIMs, right? SIMs, making the haystack bigger since 1999, right? Literally, what does a SIM do? Well, with understanding of logs and all the custom rules we implement, can we possibly account for all situations? And will we know when our SIEM misses? Well, no idea. We've got all our logs in one place, but the reality is, how do we get value out of it from an security operational perspective? When we ask another question, do we believe that our team is equipped in a way that they can actually not miss on critical alerts? Well, we found the needle in the haystack. But it was after 40 or 80 hours of security investigation and analysis of not only the data that's in the SIEM, but also the data that exists in all the little islands out there, or silos, that we couldn't feed into the SIEM or couldn't afford to feed into the SIEM, right? So SIEM technology held great promise in the late 90s, early 2000s, and we've seen SIEM platforms iterate their approach, right? The challenge is, and continues to be, SIEMs have a significant upfront cost. You pay by the event per second. You pay based on ingest rate. You pay based on retention, right? Very large costs to just invest in the platform, not to mention the infrastructure and the technical architecture needed to analyze, normalize, parse, and then store that data in an indexable, searchable, correlatable form, right? You have to invest in the technology. And I get, we could invest in that technology in the form of EC2 instances, or you could invest in the form of another host in your ESX or Hyper-V farm and some more storage, some more disks or flash, right? But regardless, you're gonna invest. Now, couple this high upfront cost with the talent shortage, and then the fact that you still have to do threat intel correlation and analysis and staff that effectively. And you'll begin to see exactly what Forrester says, independent analysts saying, time to value with the SIEM, at least 10 months. And honestly, this is a very antiquated approach to trying to deliver security operations to the business in a meaningful way. So SIEM, what is he telling me? I shouldn't have a SIEM? SIEM's no good anymore? Well, what's the next thing? Well, a few years ago, you started hearing people talk about SOAR. That sounds promising, right? It sounds like I'm flying. SOAR, security operations, orchestration, automation, response. That sounds like I'm going to soar with SOAR technology. Well, SOAR is essentially SIEM technology, but with automation. We want to automate things, and we all know automation always goes really great, right? When you automate garbage in, what can you automatically get out? Garbage out, right? It again becomes, how can I take the data that's coming into the system, and machine learning, AI, powerful tools in my tool belt, but ultimately still rules-based automation can be very dangerous and can lead to the place that you're shutting ports, you're quarantining files, you're disconnecting network components as a result of some automation or rules-based action in a SOAR system that wreaks havoc on business processes. So, SOAR, your SIEM is basically using APIs to connect to different pieces of your network and systems architecture, right? So we have to really take a step back and say, are the tools really helping? And this is exactly where Gartner's at. I mean, this is not old. 11.3, right? This is last month, right? Today's the 1st. Yeah. This is last month. Gartner is saying, in the past, adding more tools to detect new threats has been the approach for many. We've got to leave this in the past. If you don't have a detect signal for the attack that you're concerned about, it's time to buy a new tool. And that's where the pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, the new tool is what you need approach came about, right? This is not sustainable. It's not sustainable from a fiscal perspective. It's fiscally irresponsible, not to mention the ongoing recurring costs of maintenance, updates, etc. But just tool overload. Takes 2 weeks to learn one of these tools. You got to go to 2-week vendor authorized training, get a certificate, hang it on your wall. And about the time you hang that certificate, somebody's calling you, offering you $10,000 more a year to go somewhere else. And you understand, if you're a leader, or you're a manager, or director, you understand how challenging it is to find and then really retain the IT professionals. I live that myself. I know exactly how difficult that is. Vendor management, integration complexity. This is the pathway that, well, it may have felt like a yellow brick road at one point or another, but the reality is it has not played out the way that our businesses need it to. And you need not look further than the front page of the news to determine, it's not delivering the way it should. So enter XDR. XDR is, oh gosh, I should slap myself every time next gen, right? It's the next gen approach to security operations. SIEM is there, SOAR is there, but how can I, in a cross-functional way, gather the data that's coming from all of my architecture, my different security things? When I talk about tools, I want to make it clear, I don't mean throw all your tools in the trash, right? What I mean is take the investments you have made already into endpoint protection, network, the ability for your network devices to generate flow data, your firewall, the cloud security services you have. Let's take that data and deliver value. How can we mobilize the outcomes or the alerts that we're seeing from the tools we already have in such a way that the business gets value from them? I often talk to customers about, data breaches and are the tools doing what they're supposed to do? Well, how many times have you heard of Palo Alto being sued or SentinelOne being sued as a result of a breach or a security incident? They don't get sued. They have service agreements, but people don't go after them. They've got good reputations. The tools are doing what they should be doing. They're doing what we bought them to do. They're doing what the vendor told us they were doing. The challenge is we are not watching them and aggregating the data in such a way that we have meaningful results for the business. So how do we define XDR? Well, not even the analysts can agree on this, right? Gartner says one thing, ESG says another thing, Forrester says another thing. At a high level, extended detection response, cross-platform extended detection response is about integrating all of those tools, those investments you have, into a platform approach to deliver better outcomes. Now, some XDR platforms are fully MLAI. Some XDR platforms are really highly vendor-centric. So you have what I would consider like an open XDR approach. And I'm going to use another phrase that I really don't like to use, but I'll say it, vendor agnostic, right? Vendor agnostic to a degree, but you always have some limitation, right? There's overhead associated with saying, we support everything. Vendor agnostic to the degree that you can be. But then there's also XDR platforms and approaches that are focused in on a product suite or a line of SKUs that you can bolt on to. Oh, you want to use our XDR? Well, then you need to also buy our endpoint detection response. You need to buy our managed threat hunting. Because our XDR, oh no, we don't play with that. We only play with our set of SKUs. So your bill ends up growing with, one vendor. And honestly, a lot of folks have moved to this platform or, unified vendor approach. It used to be security by obscurity and security by diversity, right? You have one, maybe two or three firewall vendors. I still talk to people today that layer, firepower in front of Palo, in front of another separate intrusion detection prevention, and then their IDS IPS on the endpoint. Layered approach, right? Multiple vendor. People are forced to move to a unified vendor because a lot of folks XDR doesn't play well. So when you think about XDR being defined, we really have to think, okay, how are the vendors defining it? What am I going to go after to buy it? Well, I think a good illustration of this, which I think illustrations are nothing more than windows through which we can see the truth. A good illustration of this would be to say, okay, how would I define a vehicle, right? Define a vehicle. It's like trying to define XDR. Well, every one of these things are vehicles. The clown car, the tank, the Pinto that explodes when you rear end it. All of these are vehicles, right? XDR is very similar. So if I walked into your office and said, hey, I'm glad we had that talk. XDR is what you need. You agree? Yep, sure enough. We need to have a whole different discussion about, okay, what is XDR? And what is apples to apples when you start shopping around for this thing that's supposed to aggregate all of your security investments, those things you've spent money on to deliver results. So what do we have to do? As an industry, I think we have to take a step back and say, let's not rely on a single vendor to define what this is. Let's look for some standards. So who do we go to for standards? NIST, CIS. What are some common CIS controls? Well, those align with group policy. They can align with cloud controls and policies there, security policies. They can align with, golly, how you tweak on your antivirus or endpoint detection platform, right? We look to standards to help us build out a framework for identifying what is and what isn't going to fulfill the requirements for the organization. So, yes. Okay, yeah. So I flashed all the acronyms up there, but let's talk about that just real briefly. Endpoint detection response, and I've got a couple slides and some illustrations that are going to go into this a little bit, but I'll just real quickly. EDR is endpoint detection and response. It is focused on the endpoint, what's happening on the endpoint. And if you go down to the floor and talk to someone who's selling EDR or endpoint protection, they will say, everything important happens on the endpoint. Well, I wouldn't necessarily disagree that the endpoint is very important, but I would say the endpoint is using a network transport layer that's also telling a story. The network is using a gateway, and the endpoint is communicating with the gateway that's also telling a story. The flow data to the DNS server that's, where the endpoint is looking up command and control traffic is telling another story. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in just a second. I want to kind of walk through, what does a business email compromise look like if all you use is EDR? XDR is really about taking all of those things I just mentioned, not just the endpoint, but also the network and the traffic on the network, the servers, the DHCP server, the Active Directory, folding those together in such a way that the picture is better. Derek, my business partner over here, often uses the illustration, and I think it's a very good one, pixels. With EDR, it's like your TV. You want a 480i old school tube TV, the picture is only going to be so good because you only have so many dots to make up the picture, right? With an 8K, which is honestly, it blows my mind, but latest generation of TV displays, LCD displays, you have far finer detail. The picture is much clearer. That's what XDR is like doing. EDR, you don't have as many pixels to work with. The picture is not as clear. Fold in XDR and all the data from everything else in the environment, and all of a sudden the picture can become very clear. How are we doing on time? I don't have a clock in front. I'm doing good. Okay. So back to the framework, XDR, and I promise we're going to get into a story here. I'll tell you a story about my own environment and a business email compromise. Security operations must matter to us, but we have to define them. And so when we look at a NIST framework for, okay, how do we define security operations? We need to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. A lot of times XDR is focused on SLAs or focused on that first thing that NIST says as a framework. Identify. Mean time to identify does matter. There's some out there who will talk about a mean time to detect. Those are very different things. Detecting that something anomalous or bad is happening in your network is very different than identifying what is causing the bad anomalous thing. Or with identification comes the ability to respond to the identified thing. But in general, we want to look at NIST framework to help us identify. So XDR is all over the map. How can we actually apply common frameworks to see where this fits in our puzzle? So we really, if we look at what the tools are that are out there, how we stratify and lay them out, we have to go from thinking about simply tools to operations. We have to take the things we already have, optimize them, embrace some level operational approach, which is to take them and maximize the value. Guarantee you, if something goes off, sends a yellow flag, some investment you already have at 2 o'clock in the morning, chances of you actually looking at it are very slim. And the tools are generating good data. Just we've got to fold it together and operationalize that. So let's talk for a minute. Let's dive into what is a business email compromise? What is some of these security events that happen? What do they end up costing us? What do they look like? What form do they take? So a recent report from IBM, cost of data breach report, put out in 2021. So this is very, very recent. What is the average cost of breach due to business email compromise? Anybody want to take a guess? $1 million? $2 million? Would it surprise you if I said you were low? $5 million, $10,000 average cost based on IBM study. This blew my mind. In Oklahoma, I can tell you, I've talked to CIOs and CISOs who've had their organization compromised, business email compromise, and it has cost them over $3 million to remediate. A big chunk of that cost ends up being the remediation provider mandated by the cybersecurity insurance company that they signed. Nobody looked. They didn't realize they couldn't use a local partner. They had to use who their insurance described. And the IR provider walked in and said, oh no, you will have XYZ EDR. You will have this kind of firewall. You will have this. And now they've spent not only remediation hours, but they're buying a whole bunch of security architecture components that they already had stuff that did this. They're now forced to buy it as a part of the remediation, right? So remediation costs, it's about remediation hours, cost of the business, all of that, but it's also about acquisition of new technologies that really get pushed down your throat, if you ask me. Another common one, cloud misconfiguration. Because what is this? This is a checkbox in a dashboard. This is how the Capital One data breach happened. They were using an S3 bucket in the cloud to store your credit card application and mine, and their third-party provider who said, don't buy another on-prem storage array, just use the cloud. It's so cheap out there. Well, somebody forgot to check a box that said, do not allow anonymous authentication, and your credit card, my credit card data, my mother's maiden name, your mother's maiden name, or my address and income all got downloaded because some script kiddie was iterating S3 bucket IDs and found with blobs that were not password protected and was open to the internet. So data breaches because of cloud misconfigurations are real, and they can be as simple as a checkbox. They're common and they're expensive. Average cost based on IBM study, $3.8 million. This is real stuff. This is the stuff you see in the news, but nobody really understands what it costs unless you're on the inside of one of these things. If you're in a regulated business, the costs go exponentially up because you've got to deal with all the compliance monkeys coming and hounding your organization about all of the things that you said you were doing, but in reality, the operational approach wasn't fully there, wasn't fully matured. So business email compromise, I think we all know what this is. Let's dive a little deeper, though, into this. This is a scam, involves attackers sending an email, phishing email to get into a mailbox. Fraudulent invoices go into your AR department, accounts payable, maybe it's payroll redirection. Hey, don't send my paycheck to that account, send it over here. Could be electronic gift card purchases. My own brother-in-law almost got had by someone saying they were the Cleveland County Sheriff. We need you to go to Love's and buy gift cards, and then we'll get this warrant. We'll get rid of this warrant for you. It was only when they said Love's gift cards, he was like, oh. But he was in total freak out mode. Now, I don't know enough about my brother-in-law to know why he would be freaked out about a warrant, but that's another story, right? So business email compromise, what does this actually look like? So typical process for business email compromise, right? You got the attacker, they send an email over to the CFO. The email is malicious. They click the link, they click the bad thing. Now the attacker, because they do this man-in-the-middle type poisoning of the website that they redirected them to, has their credentials. Not only do they have their credentials, but maybe you have MFA in your environment. Hey, kudos to you. You have to have MFA now in order to get cybersecurity insurance. But MFA does not protect you against credential token replay. Anybody seen those attacks go on? MFA, I can actually grab your MFA token and continue a persistent web state session based on you approving an event that you authorized. But if it's with a malicious website that's been man in the middle, I can replay that token as many times as I'd like. So MFA is outstanding security tool, but it is not the do-all end-all to email. So the attacker now has access to my CFO's mailbox. I'm going to pause right here. When I was the CIO at Oklahoma City Community College, my office was here. The CFO's office was here. We had a common area where we used to have a Christmas tree. We had a sofa for guests and stuff. One day, John, he's from Texas. He had his emails down. He had a piece of paper. John printed a lot of emails because he always liked to show people print. He walked into my office and he said, "Rob, why did Jerry sign this email regardless?" And he, South Texas guy, right? He showed me this email, and I'm looking at it. I don't know why he signed. What? Jerry was the president of the institution. Why? I don't know. Regards? I don't know. And Rob, he never signs regards. And okay, well, let's look at it. I look at the email, and you know what it is? It's a very long conversation. It had gone 5 or 6 layers deep of the CFO communicating with the president about a new academic program in Mexico that we were going to co-sponsor, and we needed to wire $2-something million to this Mexican, academic institution to then fund the start of this. You all get where I'm going, right? This exact thing had happened. The attacker was in the CFO's mailbox, had been reading emails, went back through their history, like, okay, what's normal? What do they usually talk about? How do they talk? What does he usually say? What does the signature say? They recreate it. We're redirecting things. And this is what they do. They jump in the Office 365 mailbox. They create auto forward rules. They observe, okay, what's normal? How they usually sign emails, what they usually talk about. When they ask you to move money around, as these C-level positions typically do, what are they doing? And then they create auto delete rules so that when something shows up somewhere that they don't want to show up, they get rid of it right away before it ever even shows up in your Outlook client on the desktop. So then they send an email to accounts payable that's malicious in nature. Accounts payable says, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And they say, "Absolutely. Absolutely. I can confirm. We definitely want to send that money." Okay, $2.5 million. You said wire it. Let's go. So let's talk about how we would break down this investigation real quickly. Well, let's look at what EDR sees. So this is one of my Arctic Wolf slides, but I think it tells a really important story. Out of all the sources you could fold into investigating and actually telling the story of what happened in the organization, EDR only tells a very small part of this, right? The detection opportunities are rich there. You're clicking a link to a phishing domain in a business email compromise. You're posting credentials to a fraudulent site. The attacker is logging in from a non-approved country. You have impossible travel log on activity. O365 auto forward rules are created. Auto delete rules are created. And what is the EDR doing? They didn't even see it. It never saw the traffic, which is why an XDR approach to holistically seeing all of the investments I've made into security technologies and tools and infrastructure components, an XDR approach is so important. All right. So because my shirt says Arctic Wolf, I have to tell you all about why Arctic Wolf solves this problem. So what is Arctic Wolf Security Operations? What we've developed is a cloud-based platform that performs XDR. We're an open XDR company. So what we do is take your existing technology investments, those things you already have. We ingest that data from all of those things, firewall, cloud, endpoint protection. We then centralize that data in such a way that we can correlate it. We enrich it with threat feeds we subscribe to on your behalf. We see over 1.6 trillion observations from our customers globally every, I think it's 6 hours now. So we're seeing trillions and trillions of observations a day. We become our own threat feed essentially because of the volume of data we see coming from everyone's SentinelOne, yes. CrowdStrike, yes. McAfee, yes. Trend Micro, yes. We're seeing all of these sources of data, whether it be cloud, on-prem, network, firewall, everything, right? We're seeing that data, but then we're using the concierge delivery model to deliver to you managed detection response service, cloud detection response service, vulnerability management, managed security awareness training, folding in information from dark web scans, who's clicked the bad link, whose credentials are exposed, and then who has actually clicked the phishing link and not completed the remediation training. We need to go take their computer away, right? So it's really about the approach of putting all the data together in such a way that we deliver the best outcomes. So real quickly, we have our managed detection response, where we do 24/7 threat hunting, SOC as a service using our platform. We have our managed risk, which is vulnerability management. Key difference, nothing Arctic Wolf is a tool. What? Well, you seem like a tool. No. Arctic Wolf is not a tool. We are a service. You can get vulnerability reports. I can point you to 20 people that can pump out a 40-page PDF of red and yellow dots. We're a service. We help you interpret those results, prioritize patching. We can actually open tickets on behalf of your help desk or remediation team, whoever, by, hey, this endpoint with this IP address has this vulnerability. Here's where you need to go to download the patch for this vulnerability. That very guided concierge approach. And then our managed security awareness training, which really engages people, but it's fully managed, not a tool. We're a service. So ultimately, our goal, whether you're here to learn about, hey, what is SEM, SOAR, XDR, MDR, EPP, EDR, hopefully you're taking away something that, regardless of whether you become I hope you become an tool, but regardless, you can go back and deliver better outcomes, because by golly, we need better outcomes. We need our CIO, our CISO, our CEO, our board to understand the risk to the organization if we do not effectively iterate our approach. And XDR, I believe, is the next natural progression to this, because it leverages things that we've already invested in to deliver better security outcomes. We've got to reduce the impact and likelihood of cyber risk. We've got to deliver better results using our existing tools. So I think that's all I have for you. I really appreciate your time, you spending time with me today. I'd love to talk more with you. I don't know, Andrew or Derek, if you all want to say anything else.
Appreciate it. Great job, Rob. Appreciate everybody coming. So everybody sees everything that's going on from a political perspective, all the money that's being handed out. If you're a public company today, or you're a public entity, a state and local education, you can get things like this paid for. Our administration has realized that our security is terrible within our borders, right? And so come to talk to me about how you can make that happen. There's different ways. We can lower cybersecurity insurance if you're dealing with your cybersecurity provider today and talking about, hey, how do I MFA? All cybersecurity insurance is skyrocketed 200 to 300%. By simply deploying Arctic Wolf, we've seen significant reductions in your cybersecurity insurance, 30 to 50% sometimes. We've seen people pay for the Arctic Wolf platform by the reduction in their cybersecurity insurance. So just think about that. And
I don't really have anything. Great job, Rob. But appreciate you all coming. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Hey, everybody. Happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that looks at low-code SaaS solutions and security. Low-code platforms aren't new, but demand for the technology has soared over the last 2 years as companies were challenged to meet stakeholder demand for more digital transformation. With low-code tools, companies find they can expand digital transformation efforts through faster business application delivery. SaaS and PaaS solutions with a low-code focus can be effective for organizations looking for accelerated functionality. Often these tools include pre-built models and templates that businesses can quickly implement and easily duplicate for flexibility and versatility. But along with ease of use and rapid functionality, low-code tools must have security built in. This article offers up some tips for organizations looking to add low-code platforms or tools into their IT environment from a security perspective, including security measures to look for when considering solutions or vendors. And we have an article that looks at enabling cloud adoption in the government space. In 2022, it is estimated that federal agencies will spend $7.8 billion on cloud computing. These agencies don't buy cloud services directly. Rather, they buy through a network of reseller partners that offer volume discounts and try to bundle managed services to help with cloud management. This approach gives the reseller the power and can make it difficult for the agency to switch between cloud providers easily in the event of poor performance, lack of access, or billing transparency. That and a general lack of focus on the holistic end user experience of using the cloud are but two of the things that are preventing the government from leveraging the cloud's full potential. Excuse me. This article offers up 3 steps government agencies can take to derive the most value from cloud infrastructure and avoid many of the challenges that currently exist. All right, over on Container Journal, Hub Security has added Docker Digital Twin Platform, which secures, authenticates, and verifies traffic created by Docker containers running on an encrypted hardware platform. As Docker containers are more widely used across enterprise IT environments, cybercriminals are specifically looking to exploit multiple container vulnerabilities discovered using scanning tools. The Hub Security Docker Digital Twin Platform enforces control to block attack vectors involving the loss of theft or credentials, unauthorized access, or attempts to exploit known Docker vulnerabilities. Hub Security has developed an encrypted computing platform aimed at preventing hostile intrusions at the hardware level, in addition to offerings that prevent the theft of data. The Docker Digital Twin Platform will be incorporated into existing Hub Security technology without changing existing operational controls and services. It is designed to be compatible with all versions of Docker. And SUSE has announced a new open-source hyper-converged infrastructure platform called Harvester, which is based on Kubernetes and other open-source technologies the company is advancing. Harvester aims to make it much easier and less costly for IT teams to provision an HCI or hyper-converged infrastructure platform based on open-source technologies that can run on any type of IT infrastructure. The core open-source components of Harvester 1.0 include a distribution of Kubernetes curated by SUSE, SUSE's Linux distribution called KubeVirt, which makes it possible to deploy virtual machines on top of Kubernetes, and Longhorn, which makes it possible to run applications that require access to block storage on top of Kubernetes. It also makes use of Multus to provide multiple network support for virtual machines, KubeVip for floating IP to the Harvester cluster, and providing load balancing services to a guest cluster. Harvester is integrated with SUSE Rancher, the Kubernetes management framework SUSE gained when it acquired Rancher Labs in 2020. All right, over on Security Boulevard, the FBI has issued a warning that a group of threat actors from the FIN7 cybercrime group has resorted to an old trick, mailing USB sticks loaded with bad USB malware to companies. The packages are disguised by attackers and appear to recipients to come from the Department of Health and Human Services or Amazon. Since August 2021, the FBI has received reports of several packages containing these USB devices sent to U.S. businesses in the transportation, insurance, and defense industries. The packages were sent using the United States Postal Service and United Parcel Service. The parcels in these cases contained LilyGo branded USB devices. This technique continues to be a successful way to get unsuspecting victims to plug them into their laptops, as users are curious and want to see what secrets they contain. Mailing malware-loaded USB sticks was quite common years ago, but has become less so today, which makes the timing right for cybercriminals to try the tactic again. And speaking of the FBI, it, along with CISA and the NSA, have issued a joint warning of Russian attacks on critical infrastructure after threat actors linked to Russia used multiple techniques to attack a wide variety of U.S. targets. The alert noted that Russian state-sponsored APT actors have used common but effective tactics including spear phishing, brute force, and exploiting known vulnerabilities against accounts and networks with weak security to gain initial access to target networks. It also noted the attackers have demonstrated sophisticated tradecraft and cyber capabilities by compromising third-party infrastructure, compromising third-party software, or developing and deploying custom malware. In addition, they have proven they can maintain persistent, undetected long-term access in compromised environments, including cloud environments, by using legitimate credentials. In some of those cases, the miscreants specifically took aim at operational technology and industrial control system networks and dropped destructive malware. And finally, Oxeye has announced the availability of an open-source de-obfuscation tool dubbed Ox4Shell, designed to counter the obfuscation tactics many cybercriminals use to hide payloads that exploit Log4j shell vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities enable remote code execution attacks that inject text into log messages or log message parameters. That text then finds its way into server logs and can then be uploaded from a remote server for malicious purposes. Ox4Shell works by exposing obscured payloads, so it's easier to understand what attackers are trying to achieve, which then makes it easier for cybersecurity teams to determine what vulnerabilities might require their immediate attention. The company has vowed to make available a series of open-source tools in 2022 that address specific threat classes, such as the Log4j shell vulnerabilities. All right, that's it for the headlines. I'll be back tomorrow with a fresh new batch. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with two very smart gentlemen. The first one is Giora Engel, who is the CEO and co-founder of Neosec, and Reza Shafi, who is the VP of Products over at Kong. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time and getting on Techstrong TV and speaking with me today. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I am so very excited to have both of you guys on. I want to talk to you about API management, API discovery, API secrets, API security, all that good stuff. But before, I thought maybe you guys could talk a little bit about you guys recently had an announcement about a partnership between the two of you. So I'm not sure which one of you guys wants to talk first, but if you guys kind of want to talk a little bit about the partnership and what it means, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so APIs are a huge force in the industry right now. I mean, they enable digital transformation, and they grow so fast for every organization. It means that the whole ecosystem behind it needs to grow too, and needs to become more mature. So I think that partnership is basically taking all the goodness and leadership that Kong built in the API management space. With the API security and innovation that Neosec brings on the security side. And fuses it all together so that the developers, the operations people, and the security people can all work together and do it right.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Giora said in that APIs are like, as the digital world is growing, the number of APIs behind everything we do, every digital touch point here is growing exponentially. This very Zoom is backed by API calls right now. We're talking over API calls. And so, the API lifecycle world is critical part of the infrastructure. And I'm really happy that Kong is working with Neosec to deliver an end-to-end solution for that.
Well, that's great. And I have to say that, between DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard, APIs are a major focus for our readers. And whether it's, just knowing what APIs are being used these days to API security, to just ways to manage them effectively, definitely APIs are a very large part of the conversation that we have on our sites. And so I think this partnership that you guys have is going to go a very long way to making sure that APIs are managed effectively and are secure, and that's a big thing with our readers. So congratulations on that partnership. I do want to talk to you about APIs because you guys are all about APIs, and as I said before, it is a very large part of the conversations that we have across our sites. So I feel like we've been talking about APIs for many, many, many years, 10 years, 15 years or so, or maybe even longer. But when they started, they were just kind of these little things that, little connector things, and nobody really gave much thought to them. I'm not sure back then people recognized the force that APIs would be in the development world and the impact that it has on our now interconnected society. But as the API use has grown and API adoption grown, it seems like the ecosystem is getting more complex and more difficult to manage. So what do you guys, I guess I'll start with you, Reza. Where are we with respect to just kind of harnessing and managing APIs?
Yeah, I like to think about these in sort of phases or generations, right? If you go back to, let's say, 15, 20 years ago, you're absolutely right. APIs were around. We just didn't formalize them as such. Even in the world of Corba and XDR, some of us were familiar with those were APIs. Then we started talking about them as formal things. This was about 7 years ago. And REST was really a big part of that revolution. But back then, we thought that REST was going to be the be-all and end-all. And the world of API management came to being a lot around REST. And now we're, I think, in the midst of a new revolution, right? A new evolution in the last 2-3 years with not just REST, but gRPC and GraphQL and Kafka. All of them are APIs, but also with the underlying infrastructure changing, with containerized infrastructure, as well as the application architecture changing from monoliths to microservices. And that's what's so exciting, because the number of endpoints that have APIs is just increasing exponentially with all these different variations. So it has been around. Now we're on the third sort of generation and revolution of it. And it's always exciting times.
So,
and now, in a sense, I would add that the new move to microservices creates so many different APIs. It creates a lot of opportunities to build things better and more effectively, but it also makes it much harder to monitor because, all of a sudden, instead of one application, you have a bunch of microservices and each one is doing a different thing. And from a monitoring perspective, you need to be able to see what's going on.
Yeah, very, very good point. And that to me, for many reasons, is I think one of the biggest issues that we do have with APIs right now is just understanding what we've got and what's happening with all of those APIs. Have we reached a level of complexity that the average organization these days is just not easily, they just can't manage it easily like they used to be able to, or do we, are we just kind of maybe halfway down the road?
I feel that, that most organizations that we speak to, especially the larger ones, I think, if it's a small organization, like, a new company that started a new service, they typically know, what they're building because it's just one service. But for the larger organizations, the problem is that there are so many different teams and each developer team exposes other APIs, and sometimes they're legacy, sometimes they're new. So just getting an inventory of all these APIs and standardizing the way that they're exposed is super, super, super hard. But they all agree that, ideally they would like to standardize. They would like to set up, the API management platform in a standardized way. But first, they need to discover all these APIs and find where everything is so that they can manage it better.
So where do you guys see organizations then on this path to API discovery and just knowing what they have? Do you think that maybe these the newer maybe cloud native companies that have really pretty much always done their business using APIs, do you think they have a better handle on API discovery and API management than companies that have kind of embraced APIs as a way to digitally transform their existing systems and processes?
I would say, I think that the problems begin no matter whether you're cloud-born or you're a blue chip company, right? The problems start when you're 100 people or more. As soon as you start having some level of, interaction involved across multiple teams who are building their own APIs, you will get into environments where it's like, no, I've already created this API, go discover it here. Now, the level of complexity increases though. We, at Kong, for example, have customers who have over 10,000 different APIs that they have to deal with. And their number one problem is that people go reinvent the wheel. And that leads not just to inefficiencies because people are recreating things, but to the actual end user experience suffering. Because they're not consistent. They don't flow together. If you're not using the same, for example, ordering, order management API, you're just going to get different pieces of information. So it goes to the very core of the digital experience we're talking about.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that in turn can actually decrease the customer experience, which kind of, if you don't have a good customer experience, you don't really have a good company. So, and you can't really move forward. So, do you, when we're talking about APIs and API adoption, do you think that the APIs have actually have they been the catalyst for a lot of these digital transformations that have happened? Or do you think that digital transformation and just kind of in the more general sense, not what's happened over the last 18 to 24 months, but just kind of the acceleration of IT environments and digital environments, do you think that that's happened because of APIs, or do you think that APIs have actually caused that to happen? Like, which is the tail wagging the dog?
I would say that the digital transformation is a business need. Mm-hmm. And I think this is why it's such a strong trend, because, in the end of the day, the business need is really what sets up the rules of what the company is working on, right? So, they need to expose all these services and work with partners in order to fulfill a bigger service and so on. And therefore, they need to build APIs and integrations that enable external parties to work with their systems. So APIs are kind of the building. I would say they're the building blocks of digital transformation.
Okay, all right. Do you think that organizations though have thought as much about API security as maybe they should have when they decided to go down the road to a massive API adoption?
I think it's not. For sure, it's not enough today. When we work with large financials and healthcare companies, we see that they're still in a very early stage of getting a hold of that environment. I think 2021, or maybe the transition between 2021 and 2022, is exactly that point in time where most organizations start to think about it. And they didn't necessarily go all the way and solve the problem for themselves, but I think now it's a very, it's a very well-known topic. Every CISO has to know about it and has to have a plan, to have an inventory of the APIs. So I think we got to this level of maturity.
Do you think not knowing about all of the APIs that an organization is using, do you think that contributes to the security issues that aren't even really on the radar for these organizations? Especially when we're talking about for APIs that are not so well created, if you will.
A lot of the security issues and the specific use cases that were well publicized in the media, mm-hmm. Stem from an API that is not well known. It's not typically not exposed by mistake. Mm-hmm. It was built for some purpose. Like 1,000 different APIs that were built for other purposes. But then nobody actually monitored it or knew about it from a security perspective, so nobody could know if it's abused, for example. So that a lot of problems start like that.
This is actually, to me, why the integration between Kong and Neosec is very interesting, because if it's a known API and it's already on the gateway. Like someone has explicitly said, we're going to protect this API with an API gateway. Then already you've started to think about security, right? And that's part, like you have the ability at the very least to go and secure this thing very well with a gateway. But the majority of the problems stem from, as Giora said, these shadow APIs, right? That are there. No one has thought about not only inventorying them, which goes back to the problem we were talking about at the beginning, but even just securing them in front of a gateway. So together now we can discover the ones that are not exposed and bring them into a gateway so that they're properly secured.
And it seems to me that we seem to have a very, very large issue with API security and API abuse. And I don't know if that's just because in the past organizations really didn't think about APIs as a threat vector or as an important element of their IT security strategy. But do you think that that's changing as far as understanding the security risks that APIs can bring to an organization?
I think there is what we learned from a lot of CISOs that we work with. I think there is a big shift in the way that they perceive their own role and the role of the security team, because for many years security was mostly about the infrastructure, the corporate network, the devices, and so on. I think in the last 2 years, it's very clear that data centers are not built anymore. People are not building new data centers; they're moving things out and building new applications. And also, most employees work remotely anyway. So it's there's less emphasis on the corporate network. Instead, they need to focus on the application environments, which grow like mushrooms. All of a sudden they have like 100 different services that they need to expose to the outside because of the digital transformation. So the security teams have to kind of transform and have these capabilities, both from a discovery and visibility perspective and tooling, but also from a knowledge perspective. They need to be able to be responsible for the product security or the application security, in addition to the infrastructure. And I think this is a big shift that will continue to contribute to the growth of the security market.
So, there's so many things that we can talk about when it comes to API security. We can talk about it from the developer perspective. We can talk about it from the user perspective. We can talk about security. We can talk about integration. We can talk about so many different things. But it's definitely a topic that is not going to be going away anytime soon. And it's also definitely something that is going to be, I would think, actually expanding over the next year as more organizations do recognize the impact that APIs do have on their both their customer-facing applications and their internal ones. So what do you guys see next for APIs? Do you expect to see kind of greater management of API and maybe a next generation of API technology kind of moving out to kind of help maybe make more secure APIs? Or do you think that we might actually be moving away from APIs altogether, not immediately, but eventually to something that might be more secure from the start and easier to manage and, quote unquote, the next big thing?
I don't think that APIs are going away. I think they're going to be part of the toolkit and growing importance forever, just like an operating system is, right? Operating systems have not gone away, even though Kubernetes came on top of it, for example. So 100% is going to stay. I think that the trend in the next couple of years, in my perspective, is going to be around decentralization with control. So you're going to have more and more teams that are going to have to be able to work on their own pace, with their own tools, with their own processes. But how do you have all these teams do that in a way that allows it to be secure, that allows it to be discoverable, that allows it to be well managed? And that's the type of thing that I think the CISOs and the CIOs are going to be most struggling with. And, I hope that Kong and Yosek can help them with.
Yeah, I just to add on that, I think, as building blocks of digital transformation, they cannot disappear. Digital transformation is only going to accelerate because of the business need. I think that what we're going to see is better processes, better interactions between all the teams that are involved, and better products that enable that type of interaction.
Well, I have to tell you, I expect APIs are going to be a very large part of the conversation for at least the next year to 2 years and even farther out. So I wish you guys the best of luck on your collaboration there. And I think it's going to do great things for the market in general. So congratulations to you both for that. And thank you both for coming on Techstrong TV and having the conversation with me. It was a pleasure speaking with you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here with a webinars preview. I always tell you, we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. I've got 3 today that I really think you might want to check out. So please mark your calendar and join me. The first one is called The Synchronization of Chaos. This one is happening Thursday, January 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This is sponsored by Gremlin. As we've moved from monoliths to microservices, we have seen the benefits of decoupling services, such as increased developer velocity and more maintainable code. Service independence was also supposed to lead to more reliability, but cascading failures, I should say, seem more common than ever. So why does this happen and how can we solve it? In the field of chaos theory, there is a phenomenon wherein disparate chaotic systems will become synchronized over time when they're connected to each other. So this is known as the synchronization of chaos. So in this session, we're going to dive into the concept of chaos theory, how synchronization of chaos applies to complex technical systems, and some best practices to avoid cascading failures and major incidents. I'm really, really interested in that one. I think it's going to be really fascinating. All right, the second one is called DevSecOps, Closing the Security Gap with Developers. This one is happening Friday, January 21st at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It is sponsored by HackerOne. Organizations that rely on developing secure functional products understand the value of increased collaboration between security and development teams. Tighter partnerships between the two teams can allow organizations to deliver better, safer products faster. But how can this work in the real world? This webinar will discuss the following areas: the value of increased collaboration between security and development teams, how tighter partnerships between the teams can allow the organization to deliver better, safer products faster, GitHub's mission and approach to DevSecOps, such as putting developers first, GitHub's DevSecOps program and the critical role that ethical hackers play, and finally, GitHub's bug bounty program and the importance of building long-lasting relationships with hackers. All right, the final webinar I want to let you know about today is called DevSecOps Best Practices, Automating Kubernetes Network Security Policy. This is happening Tuesday, January 25th at 11 a.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. It is sponsored by Tufin. As Kubernetes use grows, so too does risk resulting from poorly designed Kubernetes network security policies. Tune in to this webinar to learn how you can automate the creation of secure Kubernetes network policies and inject those policies into your go-to CI/CD tools such as Jenkins. So in this webinar, attendees will learn some best practices and pro tips for gaining real-time visibility into their clusters and north-south and east-west traffic, designing and deploying secure Kubernetes network policies, and accelerating code promotion and shifting security left by leveraging Kubernetes security policies in your automation pipelines. Good stuff there as well. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview. Please check back with me tomorrow. I will have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, we are back. Rounding out today's Techstrong TV broadcast, we have The View with Vizard, in which Mike Vizard speaks with Go2Cloud Careers CEO Michael Gibbs, and they discuss why standardizing on a single cloud is an invitation to an outage. Indeed. Let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Michael Gibbs, who's the CEO of GoCloud Careers. They are an education, training, and coaching organization to help people build their cloud careers. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here.
We have seen a lot of cloud outages lately, and I wonder from your perspective, is this really net new, or are they just getting a little bit bigger? But we had cloud outages all along, and people just kind of muddled along.
You know, in about 25 years of designing the world's most critical networks, there were certain things that we learned. Never, ever use a single service provider. So for example, when we'd connect our offices, we might use AT&T and Verizon, or NTT and CenturyLink. And the reason we did this is if you have two physical wires from the same company and a physical wire's cut, you still have connectivity. But if that organization, that AT&T, that Verizon, that Azure, that AWS, that Google, has a network problem or a control plane problem or gets hacked, you're completely out. So when we build networks, we always use two companies. And when we build clouds, we've recommended forever, never, ever under any circumstances use a single cloud, because all organizations go down and they'll have outages. And if you're using a single cloud, you'll go down with it. So I don't think this is new. In fact, I've been dealing with these things for 25 years. We've always advised our customers never to do this. And now they're doing it. And now we're starting to see the sequela of putting all your eggs in one basket. We've had major cloud outages this year across AWS, Google, and Azure, and they're great operators, but it's expected if you're running enough technology systems and they're complex enough, they're periodically going to fail.
What drives people towards a single cloud? I mean, we've been hearing a long time where CIOs always want to kind of reduce the number of vendors that they have to deal with. They think maybe they'll get a deeper discounts if they line up on one cloud provider, but ultimately, maybe it's just inertia. What do you think is going on here?
I don't think it's inertia. So when I actually read the certification materials that are put out by the training providers, Google, Azure, AWS, they're encouraging, saying, look, if you want to build a high availability solution, use two of our data centers, and we'll get you to 99.999% available. But the reality is it's using two people in the same basket. And then the cloud providers would say, wait, if you want really high availability, use two geographic regions and use two data centers in each region. And then you'll have 99.999% availability, which means 5 minutes and 15 seconds of downtime per year. But if you do that, which all the cloud providers are telling their customers to do, and the cloud provider has a hiccup, you're not getting that. And we can see with AWS, with their strategy they recommended, multiple data centers went down at the same time, multiple geographic regions went down at the same time. And it's everything that we've always expected when you deal with a single cloud provider. But the cloud providers are encouraging this.
When I talk to some CIOs, they get antsy about the total cost of IT, and they say, well, each time I add a new cloud, I have to hire a specialist to go manage that. I got different frameworks, and the total cost of IT goes up. So how do I kind of navigate that issue? If I'm going to use multiple clouds, how do I do that in a way that contains my costs?
It's a training issue, and it's a bargaining issue, and a business issue. I'll explain the three. It's a training issue. So many people decide that they're going to learn a single cloud. And if they only learn the name of a service and how to configure that service is like a certification, they're going to be stuck. So for example, in all clouds, all computing is done on virtual machines for the most part, or containers. But let's take the virtual machine. If somebody knows what a true virtual machine is, they know what to do in their data center with VMware, They know that it's what they do in AWS, Azure, or Google. But the cloud providers are basically selling services that are relatively old services with brand new names. So AWS calls it Elastic Compute Cloud, and Google calls it the Compute Engine. And by the time we're done, the people don't even know that it's the same technology with a different cloud provider. So when we train our people, we make sure that they know all clouds, and then it's never a problem. The same people can do it. Now, on the how do you get your total cost of ownership down, that's relatively easy. See, what happens is when you use multiple cloud providers, you've got bargaining power against both of them. When a cloud provider tries to raise your rates, you can say, no, I've got another cloud provider. So while a cloud provider will give you an economy of scale by using a single cloud provider and better pricing, you can negotiate better by using multiple clouds. And many cloud providers offer a discount of 30 or 40% or some big discount initially to get people used to their systems. Now, when you've got, and then they raise it after a year, like a cable company would do, buy this discount for the first year. And by using multiple clouds, when they try and raise your rates, you could say, I'll issue a press release that I'm going to Azure. I'll issue a press release that I'm going to Google. I'll issue a press release that I'm going to Oracle. And that press release can be so damaging to the cloud providers that it could cost millions, if not billions of dollars of lost earnings. So when you use two clouds, not only do you have more security, you're also getting in the position where you now have bargaining power against your cloud provider should they choose to raise your rates or not like your business, for example.
Do you think the whole situation is going to get more complex? We see all these cloud native technologies that are coming down the pike. There's Kubernetes, containers, microservices, serverless frameworks. It feels to me that there's just a lot more dependencies in those architectures. So might we see more outages caused either by the cloud service provider or the IT team trying to use those services?
I think both. I think as these clouds get bigger, we have to remember these cloud providers are some of the best network and data center operators in the world. They're really great. But the issue is, how big these networks get. And when you start scaling beyond a reasonable amount, there's so many things to go wrong. So I expect to see more things in the cloud provider. See, in the data center, we've got our servers, we've got our storage, our load balancers, and network, and we're in complete control over it. It's not ours. It's ours. And then we turn that same data center into a cloud by basically installing a control plane and a data plane. And organizations do this with like Nutanix or OpenStack for their own private clouds. It adds a layer of complexity. So now as we have clouds getting complex, it does do that. But I still think it all comes back to a training issue. For example, the people like me that have worked in networking for the last 2 decades, every time we see a new cloud technology, we're like, okay, I did that with Cisco in 1985. Wait, Cisco had that in 1999. Okay, IBM had that in 1970. And it's the same things that we're doing on the cloud now. We're just renaming the services with new things. So I think the problem is it's training, because people are just learning the name of the service and how to configure these services. And they're not learning how it works and why it works and the underlying things. And the reason people are going to the cloud is to reduce the complexity so they don't have to know these things. But if you don't know how something works, you don't know how to design it. And if you design it improperly, things are going to break. So that's what I think is causing this. The cloud providers have come up with such complicated names for such simple services. A virtual machine being called Elastic Compute Cloud, for example, or object storage, which exists in every data center and every cloud provider. Amazon Simple Storage, Microsoft Blob, Google Cloud Storage. By the time we're done with these names, it becomes complicated to figure out what it is. So that's what I think is causing the complexity, the marketing departments of the cloud providers.
What is your sense of what percentage of workloads will actually wind up running in the cloud? People have these on-premise investments. Sometimes you hear 70% of workloads are still running on-premise. What's going to be the balance, or is everything going to move to the cloud?
I think, for a while, we're going to go straight to the cloud, and then we're going to realize that the cloud is not as good as we thought. I love the cloud. The cloud is business transformational, and the agility of the cloud, the ability to get what you need when you need it and scale up in capacity when you need it, is really business transformational. I absolutely love that. So while we're talking about the scalability and the performance, yes, but what problems do we have with the cloud? Well, they're not on-premise, which means if we go from our data center to a cloud provider who may be 1,000 miles away, we're dealing with latency, which can be in the form of milliseconds, which for normal applications like a web application is meaningless. It's nothing. But now we get into financial applications where a nanosecond, where you could process a trade faster than your competitors, can mean billions of dollars a year in competitive advantage and extra business value. Those kind of things can't go to the cloud. So I think as the cloud matures, organizations will be running their own clouds, whether it be a Nutanix type cloud or an OpenStack Ansible kind of cloud in their data center, and they'll be connecting that cloud to 2 or 3 clouds. And the things that really need low latency, ultra high performance, that'll be in the data center. And the things that need the agility, the scalability, the performance, I see all of that going to the cloud. So I'm not sure what percentage it's going to play out, but being local gives you such performance, and being on the cloud gives you such scalability. So I think it's going to go first to the cloud, and then we're going to go back to some of the data center. And I think it'll be a hybrid going back and forth. I feel like that's the best solution.
We saw a big rush to the cloud in the wake of COVID. Do you think some of those workloads might be repatriated back to on-premise systems as we kind of return to something that eventually feels like a new normal?
It depends. It depends how they were architected or re-architected. So there's 2 ways organizations would have moved to the cloud. They would have done lift and shift, which basically is you take a virtual machine in your data center, you copy it to the cloud as is, and you move it. And the cost to do that is effectively nothing. Those workloads could easily go back to the data center should the organization choose to. But in most cases, I don't think they will, because I think the agility of the cloud and the simplicity of the cloud is going to make it worth it anyway. So, those workloads could go back and forth. Now, there's the cloud native things where the companies recode their application. It can be thousands of dollars to millions of dollars to tens of millions of dollars to recode your applications to move to the cloud. Once you do that, you can't take them off of the cloud. They're only going to work on a cloud. So it depends which organizations were changed. And organizations that are afraid of the cloud, but know it's there, have done that lift and shift. And that's offered a new level of agility and remote management, which is extraordinary. But organizations that are looking for that true transformation are going to be using some of those serverless features, and those require changing the application so much that once you change it to go to the cloud, you're stuck. It's pretty hard to get off of the cloud.
How automated do you think things will get in the future? We are moving towards this hybrid cloud mentality. Can we scale without throwing more bodies at things? Because frankly, it's getting hard to find those bodies anyway. So what can I count on for automation or even artificial intelligence going forward?
Well, automation, what we can see and do now is for the DevOps people, they're pretty good at deploying automated things, and there's infrastructure as code, and you can literally redeploy a data center if you have it deployed as infrastructure and code in literally an hour or 2 in another environment. So I see that removing the need for all the implementation engineers and some of the junior engineers that are actually doing the configuring. But in terms of the complexity of this, it's getting more and more and more complex. And the more services we use, the more and more complex it gets. So we're going to need more architects as system designers, more engineers. But what I see is, I see arbitrage going on. There are an incredible number of extremely capable cloud engineers throughout the world, and they're willing to work for a lot less than US workers. And when you're on the cloud, you can work anywhere, anytime. So I don't see a worker shortage for very long in these engineering kind of positions. Amazon, Google, they're training people in developing nations and getting them certified in huge numbers and getting them prepared for their careers. So I don't think we're going to have a shortage of people. I think the issue is, preparing for the right job and being great of it. I know right now we're a shortage of people because no one really understands the cloud. They don't understand that it's just a network and a data center that's been virtualized. It looks fancy because the marketing and the fluff around the cloud makes it look so complex. But when you strip it back down, it's a network and a data center, and almost every new invention on the cloud is old. For example, one of the major cloud providers just announced east-west routing, which means routing in between subnets. Cisco did that in 1985. And, so a lot of this stuff is just rehashing of the old technology at a much greater speed and much greater performance, but the tech itself is still relatively old.
Do you think the term itself may quote unquote dissipate because, well, if everything's a cloud, then what's the point in calling it a cloud? Because we're just using everything as now part of the extended enterprise.
That's the funny thing about the cloud. In 1997, I was working on a cloud called Frame Relay. And then in 1999, I was working on a cloud called ATM. And around 2000, I was working on a cloud which was specified in RFC 2547. It was a BGP VPN. And then around 2001, 2002, I was working on a VPLS cloud. And really all a cloud is when you don't know what's going on in there because it's hidden from you. And that's really what cloud computing means. So the cloud is just like, I don't know what it is. So the internet itself, people would refer to as a cloud. So now cloud computing is basically just renting somebody else's network in a data center. And if somebody would make that clear, everybody would know what cloud computing is. So we've been using the term cloud now for 30, 40 years. So I don't think we're getting off the term cloud any day soon.
All right. So what's your best advice to folks as they kind of look into 2022 and we're trying to figure out what our strategies are going to be? What should they be thinking about?
Our people should always be thinking of, build the right availability for your performance needs. And for most enterprise organizations, big global organizations, that's going to need multiple clouds. I think if to be successful, and I know to be successful, you can't just train your people in the cloud. Because if you just train them on cloud services, and the main job that the employees have is taking things from the network and the data center to the cloud, if you don't teach them the network and the data center, when they move things to the cloud, they cause problems. I'd say the last thing that has to be done when you're training your people is to make sure they know what the underlying technology actually is and how that technology actually works. It's one thing to say, here, Mike, here's how you cook an omelet. And most of the training that's out there is kind of like a cookbook. Here's the name of something and here's how to cook it. But if you're an architect or a system designer, you need to know how it works. You need to be able to go to the CEO of a company and ask them about their business, figure out their business problems, their business pain points, their business goals, be able to analyze their financial statements, be able to look at what's going on in the business and craft a technology solution out of that. So we need to make sure that our people in the field are being trained to not only know the technical piece, but to know what problems they're trying to solve. And if the person doesn't have the technical acumen, the business acumen, the emotional intelligence, the leadership skills, they won't be designing the right solutions to benefit the company. So I like to say this, architecture is a team sport. System design is a team sport. It's best to be an expert at your one thing and then bring in a bunch of experts to help you. That's how I've designed architectures for 25 years, and that's why they've worked. I never pretend to know everything. I bring in the best. I try to be the coordinator of the best in the world, and that's how I design things. And I recommend more organizations to be a team as opposed to hiring a jack of all trades and a master of none.
All right. Well, I can guarantee you don't want an omelet that I made. But Michael, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much. And it was such a privilege to be here with you today.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
All right, that wraps up today's Techstrong TV broadcast. What a great lineup on today's show. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Just a quick reminder, we've got a virtual summit coming up this week. It is Predict 2022. I'm so very excited about it. It is happening January 19th and 20th, and we have an amazing lineup of speakers talking about all topics related to DevOps, security, cloud native, so much more. We've got some educational professionals. We've got some venture capitalists. We've got some practitioners, and we've got so many very smart people who are going to be presenting at this year's event. I highly encourage you to check it out. Just go to techstrongevents.com and to check out Predict 2022. You can see the agenda, you can see the lineup of speakers, and you can register. I hope you join us for it. It's going to be a really great one, folks. And then I will be back here tomorrow for another episode of Techstrong TV. So I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.